There is a number that sits quietly in the background of most people's financial lives. It is not dramatic. It is not the kind of figure that appears in headlines or retirement calculators, but it holds a strange kind of power. $5,000. For most people, this amount represents something far more significant than its numerical value suggests. It is not enough to retire on. It is not enough to buy a house, but it is enough to change the way you think. And that shift in thinking is where everything begins. Imagine two people. Both earn the same salary. Both live in similar circumstances. Both have similar expenses. But one of them has $5,000 saved and the other does not. On the surface, this difference seems minor. After all, $5,000 will not solve all of life's problems. It will not erase debt. It will not guarantee security. But something subtle happens when that threshold is crossed. The person with $5,000 begins to make different decisions. Not because they are suddenly wealthy, but because they have crossed an invisible line that changes the relationship between need and choice. Most financial advice focuses on the extremes. Save $1 million, build passive income, achieve financial independence. These are worthy goals, but they exist so far in the future that they feel abstract. Meanwhile, there is a closer milestone that almost no one talks about, a threshold that exists within reach for many people, yet remains invisible to most. $5,000 is not the finish line. It is the starting line. It is the point where the psychology of money begins to shift from scarcity to possibility. But here is the strange part. Most people never realize what happens when you cross this threshold. They think of $5,000 as just another number on the way to a bigger goal. They do not understand that this specific amount unlocks something psychological, something structural, something that cannot be bought at $4,000 or even $4,900. There is a reason why this number matters, and understanding that reason is the difference between staying trapped in financial anxiety and stepping into a completely different relationship with money. The invisible boundary. Money, at its core, is not really about numbers. It is about states of being. And the human mind does not process financial security as a smooth gradient. We do not feel 1% more secure when we save 1% more money. Instead, our psychology operates in thresholds. We cross invisible boundaries, and suddenly, everything feels different. $5,000 is one of those boundaries. Before you reach this point, every financial decision exists in a state of emergency. You are not planning, you are reacting. An unexpected car repair is a crisis. A medical bill is a catastrophe. The washing machine breaking is a source of genuine fear. This is not because you are irresponsible. This is because you are operating below the threshold where choice becomes possible. When you have no cushion, every expense is a threat. Your entire financial life is spent in defensive mode, trying to prevent disaster rather than building toward anything. But something remarkable happens at $5,000. You cross from the territory of survival into the territory of strategy. This is not because $5,000 is enough to solve every problem. It is because $5,000 is enough to absorb most problems. The car breaks down, and instead of panic, you feel inconvenience. The roof leaks, and instead of existential dread, you feel annoyance. You have not escaped financial stress entirely, but you have escaped the constant low-level terror that comes from living one emergency away from collapse. This shift is not about the money itself. It is about what the money represents. It represents a buffer between you and chaos, and that buffer changes the way you think about everything. When you are no longer making every decision from a place of fear, you start making better decisions. You stop paying overdraft fees because you have room to breathe. You stop taking payday loans because you have an alternative. You stop accepting the first job offer because you have a few weeks to find something better. $5,000 does not make you rich. It makes you rational. The threshold also represents something deeper. It represents proof. Proof that you can delay gratification. Proof that you can prioritize future stability over present comfort. Proof that you are capable of accumulating rather than just circulating. And this proof matters more than almost anything else in building wealth. Because once you have proven to yourself that you can reach 5,000, you have established a pattern. You have demonstrated that you can save, that you can resist temptation, that you can think beyond the immediate moment, and patterns, once established, can be repeated. The psychology of options. Before $5,000, you do not have options. You have situations. Something happens, and you respond the only way available to you. You need transportation, so you take the loan with the terrible interest rate. You need housing, so you accept the lease with the unfavorable terms. You need income, so you take the job that undervalues you. None of these are choices in the real sense. They are reactions to circumstances. But $5,000 gives you something precious: time. Not a lot of time, not years, but enough time to think, enough time to compare, enough time to wait for something better. And in the world of personal finance, time is the most valuable resource you can have. Because almost every bad financial decision comes from not having enough time to consider alternatives. Consider the job market. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, you cannot afford to be unemployed. If you lose your job or want to leave a toxic workplace, you must take the first offer you receive. You have no leverage. You have no ability to negotiate. You are operating from a position of desperation, and everyone can sense it. But with $5,000, you have 3 months. 3 months to search properly. 3 months to interview with multiple companies. 3 months to find something that actually fits your skills and pays what you are worth. The difference in lifetime earnings between a job taken in desperation and a job found through careful selection can be staggering. The same principle applies to almost every financial transaction. When you need a car immediately, you pay whatever the dealer asks. When you have time, you research, compare, negotiate, and walk away from bad deals. When you need to move immediately, you take the first apartment available. When you have time, you find a place that costs less and fits your needs better. When you need money immediately, you accept terrible interest rates. When you have time, you explore better options or avoid borrowing altogether. This is why $5,000 is not just money. It is leverage. It is the ability to say no. And the ability to say no is the foundation of good decision-making. Every scam, every exploitative contract, every predatory financial product depends on people who cannot afford to say no. They depend on people who need something right now and have no alternative. Once you have an alternative, even a small one, the entire dynamic changes. There is also a psychological phenomenon that happens once you cross this threshold. You begin to see money differently. Before $5,000, money feels like water running through your fingers. It comes in, it goes out, and you are just trying to direct the flow toward the most urgent needs. But after $5,000, money starts to feel like something you can hold. It becomes tangible. It becomes real. And once it feels real, you start treating it differently. You start asking different questions. Not just, can I afford this, but is this worth it? Not just, do I have the money, but is this the best use of this money? The compound effect begins. $5,000 is also the point where compound growth becomes psychologically real. Before this threshold, the idea of compound interest is abstract. You can understand it intellectually, but you cannot feel it. If you have $200 and it grows by 7%, you gain $14. This does not feel significant. It does not change anything. It does not motivate you. But $5,000 growing by 7% is $350. That is noticeable. That is meaningful. That is enough to make you think, this is actually working. This psychological shift is critical because it creates a feedback loop. When you can see your money growing in real, tangible ways, you become more motivated to save. When you're more motivated to save, you add more to the principal. When you add more to the principal, the growth becomes even more noticeable. The cycle reinforces itself. But it only begins once you reach a threshold where the growth is significant enough to register emotionally. There is also a structural reason why compound growth accelerates after $5,000. It is not just about percentage returns. It is about opportunity. With $5,000, you can access investment opportunities that were not available to you before. You can open a brokerage account and actually build a diversified portfolio. You can invest in index funds with low minimums. You can take advantage of tax-advantaged accounts more effectively. Below $5,000, your options are limited. Above it, the financial world opens up in small but meaningful ways, proves that you do. But perhaps the most important compound effect is not financial. It is habitual. Getting to $5,000 requires building certain habits: consistent saving, delayed gratification, resisting impulse purchases, prioritizing long-term stability over short-term pleasure. These habits do not disappear once you reach the threshold. They continue. And because they continue, the next 5,000 comes faster than the first. The savings muscle you built getting to 5,000 makes getting to 10,000 easier. The discipline you developed carries forward. The pattern repeats, but with greater momentum. This is why $5,000 is so important. It is not the destination, it is the proof of concept. It is evidence that the system works. It is confirmation that you are capable of doing what most people say they cannot do. And that confirmation changes everything. It changes how you see yourself. It changes what you believe is possible. It changes the story you tell about who you are and what you can achieve. The relationship shift. Before $5,000, your relationship with money is defined by lack. You think about what you do not have. You think about what you cannot afford. You think about what you are missing. This is not pessimism. This is reality when you are operating below the threshold of stability. Your attention is naturally drawn to scarcity, because scarcity is the most pressing fact of your financial life. But after $5,000, something shifts. You start thinking about what you have. You start thinking about what is possible. You start thinking about what you are building. The relationship moves from defensive to constructive. You are no longer just trying to avoid disaster. You are trying to create something. And that mental shift, subtle as it sounds, is profound. This shift affects every aspect of financial behavior. It affects how you shop. Before the threshold, you shop for price. After the threshold, you shop for value. You start asking whether something will last, whether it will serve you well, whether it is worth the space it takes up in your life. You start making decisions based on quality and utility rather than just affordability. It affects how you think about income. Before the threshold, you think about your paycheck as a lifeline. It is what keeps you afloat. After the threshold, you think about your income as fuel. It is what powers your progress. You start looking for ways to increase it, not because you desperately need more money to survive, but because you can see what more money would allow you to build. It affects how you think about risk. Before the threshold, all risk feels catastrophic. You cannot afford to take chances because you have no safety net. After the threshold, you can start to distinguish between smart risks and foolish ones. You can take a chance on a career change because you have a cushion. You can invest in learning a new skill because you are not operating in pure survival mode. You can start a side project because failure will not destroy you. The relationship shift also extends to how you interact with others around money. Before $5,000, financial conversations are often sources of shame or stress. You avoid talking about money because your situation feels precarious. You feel embarrassed about what you cannot afford. You feel anxious about appearing irresponsible. But after $5,000, you start to feel a quiet confidence. Not arrogance, not superiority. Just a sense that you are managing things, that you are moving in the right direction, that you have your affairs in order. And that confidence changes how you negotiate, how you discuss finances with partners, how you make joint decisions. The mindset milestone. $5,000 represents a mindset shift from consumer to investor. And this is perhaps the most important transformation of all. A consumer asks, "What can I buy?" An investor asks, "What can I build?" A consumer sees money as something to spend. An investor sees money as a tool that can create more money, more freedom, more options. This distinction is not about superiority. It is about orientation. Before the threshold, you are oriented toward consumption because consumption is all you can afford. You work, you get paid, you pay your bills, you buy what you need, and whatever is left over feels like something you should enjoy before it disappears. This is rational behavior when you are operating paycheck to paycheck. There is no point in deferring pleasure indefinitely if you never accumulate enough to change your circumstances. But once you reach $5,000, the equation changes. Now you have something that can grow. Now you have a foundation that can be built upon. Now the question is not just what should I buy, but what should I do with this? And that question opens up an entirely new way of thinking. You start to see opportunities instead of just products. You start to see potential instead of just price tags. You start to think in terms of systems and strategies rather than transactions. This investor mindset also changes how you view time. A consumer lives in the present. They optimize for today's pleasure or today's needs. An investor lives in multiple time horizons simultaneously. They think about what they need today, what they are building for next year, and what they are securing for a decade from now. They understand that decisions made today compound into outcomes experienced far in the future. The threshold also marks the beginning of financial education that actually matters. Before $5,000, learning about investing feels pointless. What is the point of understanding asset allocation when you have nothing to allocate? What is the point of researching index funds when you cannot afford to invest? But once you cross the threshold, financial education becomes immediately practical. Now you have capital. Now you have decisions to make. Now the information is relevant, and relevance is what makes learning stick. People often wonder why financial literacy programs aimed at those with no savings tend to fail. The answer is simple. Knowledge without application is abstract. You cannot internalize lessons about investing when you have nothing to invest. But once you have $5,000, every piece of financial advice becomes concrete. You are not learning theory. You are making real decisions with real consequences. And that is when education becomes transformation. The protection principle. $5,000 also represents the threshold where you can begin to protect yourself from the systems designed to exploit financial vulnerability. The modern economy is filled with products and services that profit from people operating below this threshold. Overdraft fees, payday loans, rent-to-own schemes, check cashing services, high-interest credit cards, predatory lending. These industries exist because there are millions of people who need money immediately and have no alternative. When you have $5,000, you can escape most of these traps. You do not need to pay $35 because your account dipped below zero. You do not need to pay 400% interest for a 2-week loan. You do not need to rent a television for 3 times its retail price. You have options, and having options means you stop bleeding money to financial predators. The amount you save by avoiding these poverty taxes can be staggering. The average American pays hundreds of dollars per year in overdraft fees alone. Add in payday loan interest, late fees, reconnection fees for utilities, and all the other small penalties that come from living on the edge, and you are looking at thousands of dollars per year. Money that could be building wealth is instead being transferred to institutions that profit from financial desperation. But the protection goes beyond avoiding fees. $5,000 also protects you from bad deals born of urgency. When your refrigerator breaks and you need to replace it immediately, you pay full price. When you have time and a cushion, you wait for a sale or buy a quality used appliance for a fraction of the cost. When you need dental work immediately and have no savings, you either go into debt or let the problem worsen. When you have a cushion, you can shop for a reasonable provider and pay cash. The difference in cost between desperate purchasing and patient purchasing is enormous. There is also psychological protection. The constant stress of living below the threshold has real health consequences. High cortisol levels, poor sleep, anxiety, depression. These are not just uncomfortable feelings. They are medical conditions that reduce quality of life and shorten lifespan. $5,000 does not eliminate financial stress, but it reduces it to manageable levels. It takes you out of crisis mode and puts you in planning mode. And that reduction in chronic stress has value that cannot be measured in dollars alone. The acceleration point. Here is where things get interesting. The first $5,000 is the hardest money you will ever save. It requires extraordinary discipline. It requires saying no to things you want. It requires making sacrifices that feel disproportionate to the goal. It requires patience when progress feels impossibly slow. But once you cross the threshold, everything accelerates. The second $5,000 comes faster than the first. Not just because you have momentum, but because you are no longer paying the poverty tax. You are no longer losing money to overdraft fees, high-interest loans, and desperate purchases. You are making better decisions because you have time and options. You are earning returns on your savings. Your income may increase because you had the stability to pursue better opportunities. Every factor that made saving hard below the threshold starts working in your favor above it. This acceleration continues. The third 5,000 comes faster than the second, the fourth faster than the third. This is not just compound interest on investments, this is compound effectiveness in every area of financial life. Better decisions compound, good habits compound, confidence compounds, options compound, and all of this starts at $5,000. There is a concept in physics called escape velocity. It is the speed needed to break free from a gravitational pull. Below that speed, you remain trapped in orbit. Above it, you break free. $5,000 is financial escape velocity. Below it, you are trapped in the gravitational pull of paycheck-to-paycheck living. Every month, you are pulled back to zero. Every emergency resets your progress. Above it, you start to escape. You are still affected by gravity, but you are moving away from it. And the further you get, the weaker its pull becomes. This is why people who have never saved often remain stuck for years, while people who reach 5,000 frequently build substantial wealth within a decade. It is not that the second group is smarter or more disciplined. It is that they crossed a threshold that changed the entire game. They escaped velocity and entered a different trajectory. The practical path. So how does someone actually reach this threshold? The answer is simpler than most financial advice suggests, but harder than most people want to hear. You reach $5,000 the same way you reach any financial goal. Slowly, consistently, without drama. The mathematics are straightforward. If you save $100 per month, you reach $5,000 in 50 months, just over 4 years. If you save $200 per month, you reach it in 25 months, just over 2 years. If you save $500 per month, you reach it in 10 months. The timeline varies based on your income and expenses, but the principle remains the same. Small amounts, repeated consistently, accumulate into meaningful sums. But the mathematics are not the hard part. The hard part is maintaining consistency when progress feels invisible. The hard part is saying no to purchases that would provide immediate pleasure. The hard part is staying committed to a goal that will not deliver results for months or years. The hard part is believing that $5,000 actually matters when you are at $200 and it feels like you will never get there. This is where the psychology becomes critical. You cannot think of saving as deprivation. If you frame it as giving up things you want, you will not sustain it. You have to frame it as gaining something more valuable than any individual purchase. You are not giving up restaurant meals. You are buying freedom from financial anxiety. You are not sacrificing entertainment. You are purchasing options. You are not depriving yourself. You are investing in a version of yourself that operates from stability instead of scarcity. The practical path also requires automation. Willpower is finite. Discipline is unreliable. Systems are everything. The money should move from your checking account to your savings account automatically before you have a chance to spend it. It should happen on the same day you get paid in the same amount every single time. This removes decision-making from the equation. You are not asking yourself whether to save this month. The system decides for you, and the practical path requires protection. The $5,000 is not for purchases. It is not for vacations. It is not for upgrading your phone or your wardrobe. It is for emergencies only. And an emergency is not a sale at your favorite store. An emergency is a genuine threat to your stability. The broken car, the medical bill, the unexpected job loss. Protecting this boundary is essential. If you blur the line between savings and spending money, you will never reach the threshold. The final truth: $5,000 will not make you wealthy. It will not allow you to retire. It will not solve all your problems, but it will change everything. Because wealth is not built in one leap. It is built in stages, and $5,000 is the first stage that matters. It is the foundation upon which everything else is constructed. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for the big break, the inheritance, the lottery, the perfect job, the windfall that will solve everything at once. And while they wait, they ignore the small, achievable milestone that is actually within reach. They dismiss $5,000 as insignificant because it is not life-changing in the dramatic sense. But they misunderstand what life-changing means. Life-changing does not always mean sudden and dramatic. Sometimes it means crossing a threshold that shifts your trajectory by a few degrees. And a few degrees, sustained over time, takes you to a completely different destination. $5,000 is that shift. It is the point where you stop being controlled by money and start controlling it. It is the point where you stop reacting and start planning. It is the point where you stop being a victim of circumstances and start being an architect of your future. The people who build real, lasting wealth almost always start here. Not because 5,000 is a magic number, but because it represents a set of habits, mindsets, and capabilities that compound into far greater things. It represents proof that you can delay gratification. It represents evidence that you can think long-term. It represents confirmation that you are capable of building rather than just consuming. And once you have that proof, once you have that evidence, once you have that confirmation, everything changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily, surely, inevitably. Because you have crossed the threshold where wealth becomes possible. You have entered the territory where small actions accumulate into significant outcomes. You have stepped into a relationship with money that most people never experience. $5,000 is not the end of the journey. It is barely the beginning. But it is the beginning that determines whether the journey happens at all. It is the threshold that separates those who dream about financial security from those who actually achieve it. It is the point where intention becomes reality, where hope becomes strategy, where possibility becomes probability. And that is why this number matters. Not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. Not because of what it can buy, but because of what it can build. Not because it is the goal, but because it is the gateway. The $5,000 threshold is where everything changes. Not because the money itself has power, but because crossing it